All right, this is not the fanciest book of all time, but I would absolutely attribute it to the level of success that I have achieved this far. Before I read this book, I was an idiot high school kid with no goals or ambitions, and honestly, I didn't even know what I wanted to do with my life. I knew that I wanted to make money, and I had a major obsession with cars, and in order for me to afford these cars, I needed to make money. It was as simple as that. Before I reveal what this book is, I desperately want you to know that it is not a glamorous or fancy read, okay? You need to keep in mind that I was a high school student with no knowledge on anything in life. So the paradigm shift that this book gave me held enough gravity on my life to change its entire trajectory. Although this book was packed with paradigm shifts for me, I had three main and massive takeaways, and those are the ones that I'm going to be sharing with you in just a second. These takeaways were actually the ones that held the entire weight of my monumental paradigm shift. But before we get into that, allow me to reveal the book. You probably already know exactly what it is, and chances are you've probably read it maybe even a few times. And so without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you the one and only Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I know it is a basic beginner book in the entrepreneurship world, but as you can imagine, I was a 15-year-old who had a monumental paradigm shift, okay? Now, it didn't stem from the real estate portion of the book. As a matter of fact, it had nothing to do with any of that. And with that, let me go ahead and dig into the three takeaways from this book. Takeaway number one, you need to quit telling yourself that you need one more reason to start. You see, I'd always been interested in making money, but I found myself always saying I needed to get one more thing in order for me to get started. And in my case, and at the time, it was dropshipping. I would constantly tell myself that I needed a new monitor or a new computer or a new keyboard, you name it. There was a section in the book that had to do with a kid who really wanted to make money, okay, but his parents refused to help him out. Right? Sound familiar? So instead of giving up and pretending like he couldn't do anything about it, he and his buddy went door to door and started collecting people's old toothpaste tubes, and then they would then melt them down and then turn them into nickels. The primary takeaway I had from this was I may not have the resources I need for this very specific thing, but it doesn't mean that I don't have the resources for something else. Furthermore, in 90% of cases, you absolutely have all of the resources you need in order to get rich, okay? I mean, Mr. Hunter, you did have an iPhone, and that is more than enough to start making money online, okay? This incident brought to my attention the amount of times that I had pretended like I didn't have all of the required tools in order to get started. And the only thing I was actually missing was the getting started piece. Another thing I realized, which I bet you can relate to, is that sometimes we tend to mask procrastination in the name of I am not ready. You may just be too ashamed to admit to yourself that you're just lazy and constantly trying to justify why you haven't gotten started. And I'm not ashamed to admit that, because it's only after you acknowledge that you quit being a and real change starts to happen. Now, my second takeaway, which is everybody's favorite term in real estate. Oh my goodness, okay? It is the assets versus the liabilities. At the time, I didn't know the difference between spending money as an investment and just spending money in general. I know it's a basic one, but you can imagine how much this opened my 15-year-old eyes to all the crap that I was buying that I thought I needed, but genuinely far from it, okay? When I tied this with my constantly needing one more thing in order to get started, I realized all of the things that I was buying to get started were actually just liabilities and far from assets. So there you have it again. I was doing, once again, something wrong. The idea here is that spending money isn't necessarily a bad thing. As a matter of fact, spending money can make your life a whole lot easier. But at the same time, if you do not spend money on the correct things, all it does is just make your life a whole lot harder. For an example, if you're not using the money to invest into something and instead just using the money to buy more headaches. Now, my third takeaway is perhaps the greatest one, and I can attribute 95% of my current success to, and one in which I am certain once I reveal to you that it will also open your eyes, and if not, it'll drive sense into what you're currently doing. You see, my third takeaway was work to learn, do not work for money. The entire premise of this section was emphasizing the importance of lifelong learning and the correlation between income and knowledge. The more you know, the more you're paid, in simple terms. The majority of people graduate from studies and immediately stop learning, hence why their income doesn't exponentially increase over time. I mean, think about it. The people working at McDonald's are not lesser than you and I. The only difference is I know something that they don't. But if they knew what I knew, then their circumstances would be significantly different. I've now developed an absolute obsession for constantly learning and developing my personal skills. I've very much found it to be true that the more information and knowledge that I have, the more my income increases, because now I have the ability to see the opportunities that not everybody else does, simply stemming from knowing more. I do want to make one last note before closing this out. The day I stopped telling myself I didn't have the resources, the day I started to understand what investing consists of, and the day I started to understand the correlation between knowledge and income was the start point and the foundation for my entire success. Now, I didn't just get rich overnight because of this purple book. It was because it laid out a foundation that I can consistently look back on and understand that no matter what, everything will always be okay if I just at least do these 3 things. Now, none of this is overly easy. I'm not saying that at all. It takes time and genuine effort to really perfect the understanding for these. And that's exactly why I wanted to make this video to begin with. Okay, it was something that changed the entire trajectory of my life, and I'm hoping that in one way, shape, or form, it can do the same thing for you. And with that, I'm going to close this out by saying I am looking forward to who you become, and always remember, the stars are bright, but your future, my friend, is a whole lot brighter.